Before the video begins, a special thanks to today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you haven't already checked out Skillshare, I'd highly recommend it, as it's an amazing online learning community with thousands of brilliant classes on virtually any topic, from productivity and drawing to photography and graphic design. A class that I have enjoyed in particular is Creativity Unleashed, Discover, Hone and Share Your Voice Online by Nathaniel Drew. This has helped me to think of fresh ideas, stay motivated, and maintain quality in my work. There's really no better time to get creative and learn new skills, and I believe Skillshare is an incredible way to do so. Also, signing up would be a great help to the channel. Make sure to check it out as soon as you can, because the first 1,000 people who use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium. Princess Charlotte lived an extraordinary life in her youth, marrying an Austrian Archduke before turning 18, and then becoming Empress of Mexico in the 1860s. But owing to a tragic series of circumstances, she started to lose her mind and would live the remainder of her life cut off from the outside world. This is her story. Marie-Charlotte Amélie Augustine Victoire Clémentine Léopoldine, better and more simply known as the Princess Charlotte during her youth, was born at Laeken Castle just outside Brussels on the 7th of June 1840. Her father was Leopold I, the first king of the newly established state of Belgium, while her mother, Louise, was the daughter of King Louis Philippe of France. As her parents' only daughter, Charlotte would have doubtlessly been expected to marry in such a way as to strengthen the new Belgian kingdom's diplomatic ties to another European state. But at the time of her birth, no one could have been aware of exactly how much her future marriage would impact the trajectory of her life. She was reared and educated close to the royal family during her youth, albeit within her own household. But this changed late in 1850, when Charlotte was just 10 years old. In October of that year, her mother died of tuberculosis, and thereafter, Charlotte's upbringing was entrusted to the Countess of Holst, a close noble friend of the royal family. This dynastic arrangement, which would so impact on her life, was negotiated when Charlotte was quite young. On the 27th of July 1857, she was married to Archduke Maximilian of Austria, a 25-year-old who stood close in the line of succession to his brother Franz Joseph, the Emperor of Austria. Fortunately for the couple, the early years of their marriage were relatively happy. When in Vienna, the Austrian capital, Charlotte was praised for her beauty and the ease with which she navigated the imperial court and its rituals, while the couple also spent much time in what is now the north of Italy, where Maximilian was serving as viceroy of the Austrian provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. But when these provinces were subsequently lost, the couple moved to a new residence near Trieste on the Adriatic coast. It was an idyllic start to their union, but it was soon to be rudely interrupted by events very far away in Mexico. Mexico had acquired independence from Spain in 1821, during a series of rebellions which had seen the Iberian nation lose most of its vast empire in the Americas. The new Mexican state was briefly established as an empire between 1822 and 1823, but thereafter it was ruled as a republic. Yet, there were always opposing parties within Mexican politics which sought to establish a more conservative regime, possibly with the foundation of a Mexican monarchy or a new empire. In the early 1860s, these competing political forces began behaving in ways which brought the situation to a head. The spark was a dispute between several European powers and the Mexican state over debts which the government in Mexico City had built up in the 1840s and 1850s, owing to the cost of initiatives such as the Mexican-US War. As it was unable to meet its repayments, in 1861, Mexico was invaded by France, Spain and Britain in an effort by these three powers to recover their money. While Spain and Britain quickly left, France remained, and the head of the French state, Emperor Napoleon III, now began formulating a plan for a more concerted intervention in Mexico's politics, and this would involve Charlotte and her husband, As early as October 1861, a group of conservative Mexican politicians, with the support of Napoleon, had sent a letter to Europe to offer to make Maximilian Emperor of Mexico. The Archduke was perceived to be a highly suitable candidate. Not only was he a member of a European royal family, but a member of the Habsburgs, the royal family which had ruled Spain when Mexico was first conquered by the Spanish during the 16th century. As such, Maximilian and Charlotte were deemed to be the best candidates available to become the Emperor and Empress of Mexico, and were backed by Mexican conservatives and France. Maximilian, though, was initially reluctant to accept the offer, and it was only after protracted wrangling over the specific terms of the offer that he agreed to become emperor in October 1863. Charlotte's intervention with Maximilian is believed to have been critical. The Archduchess was strongly in favour of the scheme, and it is widely understood that she was a highly ambitious woman at this point, who believed Maximilian and she could thrive as the rulers of a Central American state. Thus, it was in the spring of 1864 that the young couple set sail for the Americas. There, the woman who had been born the Princess Charlotte, and became Archduchess Charlotte through her marriage, would now become known as the Empress Carlota. However, despite their high hopes, the royal couple were not received well in their new home. Many factions within Mexican politics refused to recognize them, and a civil war was soon underway between the conservatives, who backed the new empire, and a coalition of liberals and republicans who fought to preserve the republic. Despite the less than ideal circumstances, Carlota did attempt to undertake some important work as the new Empress of Mexico. In addition, not only did Carlota learn Spanish, but she also took a genuine interest in Mexican culture, including art, literature, and history, even visiting the Yucatan Peninsula in 1865 to view some prominent Mayan ruins there. In an effort to secure their position, she and Maximilian also adopted two members of the Iturbide family, the descendants of Agustin de Iturbide, who had ruled as Mexico's first emperor over 40 years earlier in the 1820s. In the absence of a child of their own, Carlota and Maximilian used the Iturbide children as a means of securing their position by demonstrating to the Mexican political society that there was a clear line of succession should anything befall Maximilian. But these efforts were not enough, and sadly for them, their rule would not last for much longer. Gradually, in the mid-1860s, the support which Maximilian and Carlota had enjoyed amongst certain parties in Mexico evaporated. Their rise to power had been facilitated by the United States, having been distracted by its own civil war between 1861 and 1865. But with that over, Mexico's northern neighbour began taking a more active involvement in affairs to the south, favouring the Republicans who opposed Maximilian. Moreover, Napoleon III was increasingly distracted by events in Europe itself, particularly the threat of war with Prussia. Therefore, he began to shift France's interests away from Mexico. These actions meant Maximilian and Carlota were now extremely isolated and had lost a great deal of support. There was one final desperate effort, though, to save the regime. In the summer of 1866, Carlota set sail for Europe, while Maximilian remained behind in Mexico. Her mission was to drum up support for their cause amongst the royal dynasties of Europe. First, she headed for Paris in August, where despite several meetings with Napoleon III, she could not convince their closest ally to recommit to supporting Maximilian, and the French emperor even recommended that he should abdicate. From there, she proceeded onwards to Rome, where she hoped to convince Pope Pius IX to throw his support behind Maximilian, a measure which might have led to the support of Europe's Catholic powers, if successful. Yet, further disappointment awaited her here. When she was finally granted an audience with the Pontiff in late September, he was reluctant to use his influence on behalf of the Emperor and Empress of Mexico. It seemed that all was lost, and with it, Carlota began tragically losing her mind. There were signs that Carlota had been unwell from quite early on in her mission to Europe. These had first surfaced in Paris in August, when her efforts to acquire Napoleon III's support were meeting with resistance, but only fully materialised in subsequent weeks on her way to Rome. On one occasion, she is recorded as having become convinced that a passing farmer was an assassin, a possible indication that she was suffering from a species of paranoid schizophrenia. This escalated in Rome itself, as she repeatedly feared being poisoned and refused to eat or drink, while she was also increasingly prone to fits of hysteria, agoraphobia, and extreme behaviour. Perhaps the most unusual action at this time was her decision to steal a goblet from the Pope's apartments at the Vatican, and then use this to drink water from Rome's public fountains. Her state of mind would not have been aided by developments in Mexico. The civil war had turned against Maximilian, and he was increasingly fighting a losing battle. Eventually, in May 1867, he would be captured in a last stand at Querétaro City before being executed by a firing squad on the 19th of June 1867. Then, a new republic was established to replace the short-lived empire of Maximilian and Carlota. It is unclear, though, exactly how aware of these events Carlota, who from this time onwards we might call Charlotte again, was. By the summer of 1867, she was back at Trieste on the Adriatic coast, at the palace where she and Maximilian had lived for some time before their Mexican debacle. Charlotte had been moved here once her brother King Leopold II of Belgium and her brother-in-law, the Emperor Franz Joseph, had learned of her deteriorating mental state. A team of professionals were assembled to determine what was wrong with her, and a decision was also taken not to inform her of her husband's death back in Mexico, when news of that event reached Europe in late June 1867. There was widespread interest in Charlotte's case throughout Europe in the late 1860s. In 1867, several reports in the British Medical Journal outlined her mental decline. For instance, a report on the 24th of August that year stated how the former empress was suffering from severe melancholia, a catch-all term used to describe a variety of different psychological and physical ailments at the time, especially what we would now call depression. She was also highly paranoid, and the anonymous author of the same report highlighted how Charlotte was suffering from delusions as to poison being put in her food. Were she being assessed today, there is little doubt that Charlotte would have been diagnosed with a form of paranoid schizophrenia, of a very debilitating kind. But in the late 19th century, with the field of psychology only entering its infancy, there was little that could be done for her. Whatever the exact specifics of Charlotte's ailments were, she never fully recovered from them. Moreover, in January 1868, Charlotte finally learnt about her husband's execution, causing her to become even more morally broken. In a set of nearly 400 letters, she declares herself dead at the fall of the Mexican Empire. These letters, by their number and their length, also offer the testimony of her daily life, punctuated by paranoid attacks and the care given to her. In the months that followed, Charlotte was brought back to Belgium by her family, along with her two adopted sons, who were both later sent to England to study. In Belgium, a household was established for her at Bouchot Castle, a royal castle which dated back to the 12th century near the town of Mies. While at Bouchot, Charlotte completely disappears from the public, spending the majority of her time in her castle, only receiving visitors from some of her family members. To keep herself occupied, she was known to take walks, do embroidery, play cards, and listen to her gramophone. In subsequent years, as some of her relatives or servants died, a decision was made not to inform her of this, in case her condition worsened as a result. Her lady-in-waiting, Helene, Countess of Reinach-Fussen-Magne, tells about Charlotte. Most of the time, the unfortunate woman was absorbed in long silences, or in the contrary, in heated discussions in French, English, German, Italian, Spanish, with imaginary interlocutors. Discussions too incoherent, too disjointed, to be able to guess what thoughts occupied this brain. Charlotte was known to frequently make confusing remarks and talk to herself. Also at times, she would burst into a fit of rage, destroying vases and tearing up books, which contrasted with periods of calm. She would spend over 50 years at Büchow Castle, and although her condition is said to have improved to some extent as the years went by, she was never able to recommence living a normal life. Eventually, she died of pneumonia and influenza on the 19th of January 1927 at the age of 86. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Prince Charlotte of Mexico. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave me a like and a comment down below. And if you're new, why not subscribe? If you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them down in the comments, or you can find my email and Instagram in the description. And make sure you have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.